Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us here on the Breakfast Show. Time now to welcome Egyptologist Samir Abbas, and he will be talking to us about how great Egyptians were and really impeccable when it came to stone cutting, an unmatched talent, really, especially in old times. And when we talk, I guess, Mr. Abbas, about the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, the miracle of stone cutting must come to mind. So, what do you have for us?
So, good morning, first, Mr. Abbas, and first, tell us the idea, motivation behind stone cutting in ancient Egypt.
Good morning, Shireen. Good morning, Muhammad. I'm very happy to be with you today, especially for this very unique topic. And I like the way you described it as a miracle. It's actually a miracle of engineering, especially that you are talking about cutting stone. Sometimes is 1,200 tons, 42 meters, 132 meters long. We are talking about the unfinished obelisk, and that has happened 3,500 years ago, more or less. Still, by the way, still a mystery who owned the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, and we will try to reveal some of more information, more theories about who possibly the owner of the unfinished obelisk. So today I'm planning to analyze these big temples and big tombs and big pyramids as well, which is built by the ancient Egyptian people. So we see the final products, which is the Karnak temple, Luxor temple, the Great Pyramid. We see obelisk, beautiful obelisk has been erected. But we don't see how they used to do things. And that's the main reason of choosing this topic today is trying to understand how to do things. You know, for example, like cutting an obelisk and erecting an obelisk, the record of the ancient Egyptian people is like 7 months. 7 months of very hard work. And that was a record for them back in that time. So nowadays, when you go to Karnak temple and you see this beautiful obelisk of Hatshepsut, which is 28, 29 meters high, you cannot understand just by looking at this obelisk how they used to do it. You cannot understand how the sophistication work behind that. So some of the sites in ancient Egypt is left unfinished, or some of the unfinished temples, like the unfinished obelisk, and there is something happens, political reason, war, famine, economical, whatever happens for them to stop the work in a particular site. And these sites are of a great importance for us, because these sites explains to us how the process used to do things, because they left things unfinished, they left their tools behind. So some of the unfinished tombs in the Valley of the Kings as well, that's when I go to the Valley of the Kings, that is my favorite tombs to take people for, because the people I show the people the different steps of how they used to cut and decorate all of these beautiful tombs. So now I can come to your questions, the motivations, the incentives. You know, we need to understand what was the mentality, the culture back in that time to give them
why
the
big stones, not small ones.
That's that's a very good point.
Though that would be easier.
Exactly. So it is easier, and I completely agree with you. But first of all, that will not last for long. You need to understand the culture of the ancient Egyptian people in building. When they build something, there's two different types of engineering or buildings. To build something as houses for them, for their life, to live in their life, and they have to, and another type of buildings for gods and for tombs for eternity. So the question is, did we found any houses or any palaces of the ancient Egyptian kings? Rarely you can find something like that, simply because they use smaller stones. They used mud bricks to build their houses and to build even the palaces of the king, because there is no reason to use lots of money and bigger stones to build things. They know that they will live only 50 or 60 or 70 years.
They know that they will leave behind to their successors.
Exactly. But when it comes to their tombs, it was built for eternity. When it comes to this, which is like a resurrection machine for them, it represents the divine power of them, of their soul, and that should live forever. When it comes to the temples is the house of gods, and the gods live for eternity, and that's why it should be built from bigger stones, because the bigger stones will last for longer. This is answering your question, why they choose bigger stones. Another reason as well why they choose the bigger stone. So think about how they put these stones together. So if they use small stones, they have to use mortars, cement, and the mortars back in that time made from mud, straw, water and gypsum powder, and by the end it will shrink gradually. It will shrink, which is makes this building loose. But if you would like to avoid that, you will use a very large stone.
Because besides the weather factors
and the weather factors as well, you know. So,
damage the building.
And we see that in some of the early buildings, which is lived by the ancient Egyptian people. But if you would like to build a big building to last forever and not using mortar at all, you have to cut the stones so big, so the weight of the stones will work as
pillars
to keep it together, you know. So it will be difficult to shift. It will be difficult to move. It will be difficult to weather as well. So that is answering your question why these bigger stones. But it is not only because of this reason. That is the religious reason we were talking about. But the interesting thing that there was also economical and political reason. So building a pyramid for the king, a resurrection machine for the king, I'm using that as an example, is a small pyramid will work like the big pyramid from religious point of view, because both they are simple, has a symbolic meaning. But the bigger it is, that means that the more powerful this king is, the richer he is. And that's how that they use it as a media to attract the attention to how powerful and how rich and how prosperous these kings are. And the Sphinx is a very good example. You know, putting the Sphinx in the face of the people coming to visit the pyramids, and the pyramids in a high plateau, that's attracting the attention of the local people to how great their kings are, and that gives them respect, and that gives them a political power. So that's one thing. Another thing, economic reason, that's a very interesting part actually. Life in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, I mean, it was very easy. Otherwise, like the depends on cultivation. That was the main economy. And when it comes to cultivation, back in the old days, when there is flood, and the floods comes in the summertime, bring water and silt-rich soil.
It meant prosperity, I guess,
exactly,
for all.
bring prosperity. And so they work less for farming, because the water comes naturally, the fertilizers comes naturally. They just need to prepare the land, put the seeds, and then they wait until the harvest. Even fish, you know, catching fish, that was the easier thing, especially in the dry season. You can walk in the river and you can catch the fish with your hand. And no wonder the fish was the cheapest meal in ancient Egypt back in that time. It was just given to the poor people and the workers. And so in an economy like that, in a life like that, which is people, they can work, and not even hard enough, for only 5 or 6 months of the year in farming, and the rest they have enough fish, enough grain, enough fruits to survive. But how chaotic you could be. Think about yourself as a father, have kids, and in the summer vacation, when they have nothing to do, they have no study. So if you have not enrolled them in clubs, give them like something good to do, make them busy, they will be chaotic, and they will not help themselves, and they will not help you as well. So that was exactly the same way the ancient Egyptian pharaohs think about their population. So for the long vacation after the harvest season, if they haven't given work to keep their people busy, they will not be able to control them. And that's why they collected taxes from them, lots of taxes, and they give them incentives by paying them back to come and build, to come and cut stones, to come and move stones, to come and build temples and tombs. So they collect lots of taxes, and then
socio-economic interpretation, if I may say.
And then they give them this money back again, but when they come to work. And that's why the most busy work season in construction, that was in the off-cultivation season, to make sure that the Egyptians, they will be busy all the year round. They will keep them busy, exactly as you keep your kids busy, trying to keep themselves busy during the summer vacation. Money is not the only incentives they give, religion as well. So, and I will use the Great Pyramid as an example. I made another actually interview about the Great Pyramid, about the workers, and I'm completely against the idea that it was built by slaves. I think that those who said that the pyramids built by slaves, they know very little about the ancient Egyptian mind, culture, and religion. So the king for them was like a god. So building the king tomb or a pyramid, or building the king or building the gods temples, both of them is like serving gods. and they will collect good deeds, and they will have a shortcut to the heaven. And that's explained, that was another very important incentives to give to the people to come and work in these constructions, temples and tombs and pyramids, because apart from the money, they will get bonus, which is a short access to the heaven after that.
Mr. Abbas, it is speculated that the unfinished obelisk in Aswan was during the reign of Queen Hatshepsut.
Thanks for mentioning that. I'm afraid to say
it's speculation, right?
Yes, I'm afraid to say that I'm completely against that.
Okay.
And I have my own reason for that. So first of all, we don't have any documentation. So there is some illustrations, which is I brought with me, and that's the unfinished obelisk, which is the famous one. Let's talk about from the size perspective. 42 meters long. In feet, 132 feet. Weights is 12, as far as I remember, 1,200 tons of a stone.
Yes.
And that's not the only problem of cutting these stones. Another big problem is to cut a big piece like this one, an obelisk, it should be no faults. It should be like no cracks. And that's why they have to be very specific in choosing a good stone. And even if that was on the top of the quarry, this stone was cut on the top of the quarry, and then they will have to cut the entire quarry with the width of the obelisk to take it down, which is the logistics of cutting the quarry to free the obelisk itself is more difficult than cutting the obelisk itself, and then loading that on a barge, and then the barge will flow on the Nile River, and then taking that, downloading from the barge and then erecting. The logistics of loading and uploading and erecting is even much more difficult than cutting the stones itself.
Right.
So I'll come to your point. Why I think that had nothing to do with Hatshepsut. First, there is no documentations to say that there is Hatshepsut name on it. Another thing which is very important, we have to look at a match for this obelisk, where it will be standing. There is a big gate in Karnak, left unfinished, by the king Nectanebo II. And this gate is 42 meter height, the same like the obelisk, which is mean that possibly Nectanebo, which is these great reformers in ancient Egypt, who didn't have a chance to finish his reformer plan, so he started a big project by building a new gate, 42 meter height, and the obelisk comes with a gate. You know, most of the gates of Karnak, it comes with that, and that's why this obelisk is meant to be cut to decorate both of them left unfinished.
Yeah. Logical.
So I brought other illustrations for tools and diagrams as well, which is if we can cover the rest of this topic in another episode. Yes, you know, especially about the techniques, how they used to cut and freeze the stones.
So finally, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Samir Abbas, Egyptologist and researcher. Thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
And looking forward to discussing more about the greatness of Egyptian stone cutting.
And the mysteries of ancient Egypt.
Right. Thank you, Shireen, very much.
Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank you, viewers.
And by that, the viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of The Breakfast Show. See you tomorrow with a new crew.